entertainment, it's my pleasure to introduce to you hell's latest arrival, the equal opportunity killer, Alastor!
Hello, and welcome to Elephant Power Productions! I'm American Elephant, call me Kevin, coming to you live from, hell, and this is Kev Talks, a series where I talk about what I want to talk about. Once again, the time of year has come, so happy Halloween! The time of all things scary, and dare I say, spooky. This time, I intend to cover an animated show that made quite the buzz earlier this year, Hazbin Hotel. Heads up, this video will have spoilers for the entire first season, and trigger warning, I liked it. Now before anyone says anything, no, I don't think the show is perfect, nor its creator, and neither is immune to criticism. Duh. But I still had a fun time watching the first season, and arguably the main reason for that was the breakout overlord of the bunch, Alastor, the radio demon. Despite the best efforts of Vox, Husker, Zestial, Rosie, and Serpentius, Alastor is still my favorite character. I love his performance from the wonderful Amir Talai. I love the way he is animated, and more controversially, I love his jokes. Hazbin has of course been mocked by many for its overused usage of the sex jokes and the fuck words. But Alastor pushes past this problem very nicely. His swearing is some of the best in the show because he does it very sparingly, thus giving it impact and making the humor more character-based rather than just being inappropriate for the sake of being inappropriate. Speaking of things nobody stops talking about with this show, for better or worse, I love his design too. Ignoring Vivzi's insistence on adding 2 shots of every shade of red to every fucking character design, Alastor's silhouette is recognizable and strong, helping him stand out even amongst other tall kings in the show. All around, I love Alastor, and there is absolutely nothing wrong with him. Nope, nothing at all that I can make a likely contentious and frustrating video on. Okay, none of you probably find this funny, so let's just get to it. But I am keeping the voice filter though. I think we are all well aware by now that Hazbin Hotel is no stranger to controversy. You'd have to live under a rock or just not know what the show is in the slightest to be completely unaware of it at this point. And sadly, even Alastor isn't immune. Here's the tea. Thanks to a behind-the-scenes live stream with Vivzipop, we know that Alastor was intended to be a Louisianan Creole man. While there have been many people and cultures throughout history to identify as Creole, Louisianan Creole culture specifically started in the 18th century, right in French colonial communities like New Orleans, which, due to unique variations in slavery laws and religious mindsets from other colonies, allowed for more interracial interactions and relationships between Europeans, Africans, and Native Americans. That's about the quickest way I can summarize my finding on this part of history, and I recommend looking into videos that better discuss this topic like the ones on screen that I gathered most of my information from. But back to that live stream reveal. When combining this piece of backstory information with another about Alastor that will get much greater focus throughout the rest of this video, many have thus taken this and said that Alastor is canonically black in Hazbin Hotel, to which basically everyone went,
Just for reference, chat, that's a letter from Obama.
See, he's down with the blacks.
Why'd you say it like that?
This has led to many conversations about black-coded features and character design, which often circles back around to criticism of the show's character designs on a fundamental level. But I am not here to focus on that too much. No, I am here to talk about another problem with Alastor, and a much trickier one to discuss at that. Not that word exactly, but
Voodoo, like the con mama OD do.
Wrong!
Yep, in both the pilot released in 2019 and the first season released in 2024, Alastor utilizes voodoo in his magic. And here's why this is a problem for many. Let it be known before we continue that all the following information is coming from research I, a white man, have done online, so if I get things wrong, my apologies in advance. Just kindly let me know if I do in the comments and I'll pin one with any corrections. So, Voodoo is a religion spawned from the mixture of Catholicism and, more importantly, the Haitian practice of Voodoo. When most hear the word, they probably think of wild misinterpretations, such as shrunken heads, dolls that are used to magically hurt people, human sacrifices, and witchcraft. These lies have their roots with, of course, religious extremists and white slave owners, trying to ostracize the practice and further their bigotry by demonizing African slaves who practice in places like Louisiana's now historic Congo Square. Part of the reason voodoo is tricky to talk about at all is because of the stigma around it, increasing the likelihood of people getting their facts wrong. However, there is another factor. Unlike Christianity and Islam, voodoo is much more closed off, and from the research I've gathered, even the practices are not always consistent depending on the temple. But if there's anything you should take away from this microscopic history lesson, it's this. Voodoo and witchcraft are not the same thing, nor is it black magic. That is a misrepresentation and stereotype that has existed for decades. Also, while animal sacrifice is tied to the practice and you have every right to feel uncomfortable with that, let it be known that human sacrifice has nothing to do with it either. If it is a thing that happened, it would have been a very long time ago, but it does not anymore, as stated here by voodoo priestess Martine de Souza.
Blood sacrifice is pretty central to voodoo.
Yeah.
But there's also the association with human sacrifice, ritual crimes.
We don't sacrifice human beings for voodoo. It happens in the old days, but not now.
Which brings us back to the radio demon. See, Alastor in several sequences of Hazbin Hotel has voodoo iconography and symbols appear when using his magic and when he becomes demonic. And this had people pissed, because again, voodoo as a practice has been stigmatized as evil for decades. It is not some black magic or demonic force. It is about spirits, yes, but it's more than that. It connects to life all around us, goes back to West African legends about the world, and is tied into Haitian revolutions against discriminatory or slavery-perpetuating systems. It is not what a lot of fiction has made it out to be.
What do you think is misunderstood about voodoo?
Le vaudou est universel. Ce n'est pas les Noirs seulement qui sont les enfants du vaudou.
So, to recap, you have an often vilified religion with a century's worth of misrepresentation under its belt, being connected to a character who, in the context of Hazbin Hotel, is a cannibal serial killer of mysterious intentions. One who is meant to be viewed as confusing or untrustworthy by the audience given some of his actions, and only uses imagery from that part of his religious and, I guess, racial background in moments where he's demonically using his power.
Damn shit.
Simply put, it's not the best look. And to be 1,000,000,000% clear here, Hazbin Hotel fans, no, I am not saying you have to dislike Alastor now. As I said at the beginning of this video, I love Alastor, unironically. He's my favorite character in the series, and I'm excited to see more of him in Season 2. And to be slightly fair, when looking at Alastor's symbols as they are, while they absolutely are in reference to the Vebs and by proxy the Loa spirits they are associated with in Voodoo history and iconography, they don't seem to exactly line up. I thought this one that gets utilized a lot was in reference to the Marinette Loa, which is associated with power and violence in Voodoo history, but it's clearly not the exact same symbol, so is it more respectful or disrespectful? Because, I mean, if Alastor is a voodoo practitioner, you would expect him to get the voodoo symbols right, but at the same time, because people have a problem with him utilizing voodoo at all or the way he does in the show, maybe this is technically for the better. You get it, it's tricky. Oh shit, I meant the topic, not the voodoo itself! But just because I like this character doesn't mean people's problem with him isn't understandable or valid. I get why people take issue with him. The choice to connect the imagery of a historically misrepresented and vilified religion with an untrustworthy, demonic, and, well, half-black character when there are already other things you could connect him to, such as the already in-universe Goetia arts from Hell of a Boss, or, radio symbols, and doing all of this when there's no good voodoo equivalent in the show to balance this out, something even Princess and the Frog of all stories got right, it is at best an iffy choice and worse, racist. But again, I still love this character. Gee, it's almost like I'm trying to be a little nuanced about this. Listen, there is only so much I feel comfortable talking about with this topic and its intricacies as a white outsider. And no, that is not me saying white people can never talk about voodoo, so don't even fucking start. I'm saying I personally don't feel comfortable discussing too much about this topic because I know my perspective on it is always going to be limited. But if I stopped here, this would be a pretty short video, now wouldn't it? And I do certainly have more to say about the topic of Alastor and where he could go from here, but let me quickly tackle a point I have a good feeling a lot of fans of this show are going to make. Now yes, I know, Hazbin Hotel is a show literally set in hell. It's gonna be evil and offend somebody, but it and Viv take some of its topics very seriously. The biggest example is the angel content in episode 4. Same with how the show vilifies Valentino and the angels for clearly being in the wrong with their actions. So even if it would be a little bit of an abrupt stop in the story to address it, I don't blame people for wanting that same kind of vilification towards Alastor's voodoo usage. Before I continue, there's a post I want to read that I found on the Hazbin Hotel Reddit. Don't worry, I didn't go too deep, this was just the main thing I saw while doing research. Quote from user Shipiri about 4 years ago at the time of recording this. Okay, I know we literally only have one pilot episode to go off, but supplemental info from Viv and the rest say that Alastor was/is a practice of voodoo and that he is Creole. There's nothing fundamentally wrong with that. Louisiana does have a rich history of voodoo. The problem comes in when Alastor basically embodies the stereotypes and issues with Hollywood voodoo. They use vevs at random where it's not relevant for the aesthetic, show Alastor's power as evil in particular, and straight up have dialogue that refers to voodoo as tricks like it's inherently bad. Now, I don't think the Hazbin Hotel team meant to be discriminatory in any way, but it's pretty clear that not a lot of research has been done on the topic of actual voodoo, and while their intent may not have been to encourage the negative stereotypes of voodoo, from fans' views on voodoo in relation to the show, it's clear it's having an impact on them. You can make the argument that, okay, Alastor is a demon, dark voodoo exists. And that's true, voodoo can be used for evil, but the way the show depicts voodoo, I think, is less demonizing and more blatantly misinformed. I'm not arguing that showing voodoo being used for evil is the issue, I'm arguing that the way voodoo is used shows a lack of understanding and more for an aesthetic. TLDR, Hazbin Hotel needs to change the way voodoo is used in the series because it's spreading misinformation. This is a take that I pretty much completely agree with, even though it mainly refers to just the pilot. Look, like the post said, I don't think the voodoo iconography was intentionally included with malice. And I'm not going to call anyone who works on the show a racist who doesn't care about black people or Haitian people or anything like that. But at the same time, this does showcase an inconsistency with the show handling bad optics and its approach to what it depicts. So to be clear, even though I do not personally have a grudge or hatred toward Vivziepop, I do like her work, and I love Alastor, this stuff is still a problem for people, and I don't blame said people for being uncomfortable with imagery that continues to vilify this practice. It is understandable, and frankly, in my opinion, I think the team behind the show should have just cut it all out or made it radio symbols so this problem doesn't exist at all, and move on. With all of that having been said, I have an idea. A way to possibly remove this issue as it is now and replace it with something better. Because I think if the concept I'm about to explore in a very messy manner were executed well enough, it could at least recover Alastor's bad optics a little, and perhaps have his character strengthened by this something. Something heavily implied by the show already, but could now be made a little more direct? And maybe even make him scarier. Or actually scary, depending on how you feel about him. Ladies, gentlemen, non-binary beauties, rangers, and whatever else imaginable, I am now going to talk about deer. And misinformation. What? Just hear me out. Fun fact about Alastor, he was not originally part of Hazbin Hotel's story, because he wasn't made for it. Originally, he was a character created for Vivzi's now cancelled Zoophobia series. All the characters in it were, of course, animals, and Alastor was a deer. Specifically, a cannibal deer. Although he's now a part of another story, those roots have not vanished. Alastor still has a deer motif. We see it constantly in Hazbin Hotel. He grows deer antlers when he becomes more demonic. He eats a deer carcass in episode 3. Vox cooks a deer head in a song trying to diss Alastor that ends with him coming out on top and literally stealing the show. All while again, growing those antlers. And when he goes demonic, we can sometimes hear an elk call.
Oh shit!
It's not the same species of ungulate, of course, but this specific sound, combined with everything else, means the series and team are consciously tying the radio demon to horned animals. Plus, look at his design. His long legs and arms, his weird ear, hair things, hell, even his straight posture. Or I guess, ace posture.
A what now?
Doesn't he just kinda look like a humanized deer? And remember, in the finale song, Vox and Valentino share the line,
Well, the rest of hell's pissing. Alastor's missing, led with his tail between his legs.
a tail, you say? What a funny choice of words. Even his radio tower reminds me of watchtowers from poorest horror games like Do You Copy and the 4th episode of Fears to Fathom.
Look at the shadow, look at the shadow. What is that? Is this man's head an X?
Okay, but now you pretty much know for the rest of this video, I am going to be recommending the Hazbin Hotel team lean into that deer motif and have it replace the voodoo stuff. But why though?
Why?
How is this a good replacement for this?
How, Sway?
Well, it's time I truly discuss those two words from earlier, how they connect in this context, and how the power of fiction could make them the source of Alastor's dark magic. You see, deer and horned animals or creatures have a pretty solid presence in horror. They pop up a lot in the genre, and I don't just mean with Satan. Here are just some of the examples I have found or seen myself, starting with a few movies. Get Out uses the imagery of a buck to make connections to its main character, one of which is a reference to a racial slur. Evil Dead 2 has a deer head get possessed, leading to it laughing with 21st century crackhead energy. The Ritual has a beautifully animated monster design that looks like a fusion of a deer, an elephant, a moose, and I guess a member of the Shadow Wizard Money Gang. Okay, it was either that or the tree from Pocahontas, and this video is already problematic enough. Krampus is about, well, Krampus, the antlered Austrian creature of Christmas legend that comes and takes or punishes bad children. And recently, there was a film called Antlers about a horned cannibal that lives in the woods. Now, I know what you're thinking when I say those two specific words together, and yes, we will discuss that soon, but be patient, you likely misled children. Trust me, we're gonna get there. Oh, we're gonna get there. In animation, there have been multiple projects, some for kids, but with horror elements in them, featuring villains who have horns in their designs. Emperor Bellows from the Owl House wears them on his mask and grows them as he becomes more physically unhinged. The Nowhere King from Centaur World is a giant, black, wasp-bodied glob of tar with a deer skull for a head. There's Chernabog from Fantasia, the Horned King from the Black Cauldron, Maleficent from Sleeping Beauty, the Lich from Adventure Time, and of course, the Beast from Over the Garden Wall, with horns punctuating his silhouette of nothing but unknown shadows. Plus, in Gravity Falls, topical, during the first scene with Bill Cipher himself, he just casually takes a deer's teeth out. Jesus Christ. For video games, I already brought up Do You Copy, which has a goat man as its monster, one clearly inspired by stories such as the Poplik monster. But there's also Spooky's Jumpscare Mansion, and that includes this fucker, the Deer Lord, a tall, skeletal monster in a black cloak that opens to reveal a rib cage of souls who have surrendered to him. Said Overlord of the Woods also has an outdoor-themed area filled with fanged deer that try to kill you.
Oh my god, this must be that outside I keep hearing so much about.
Again, all of these are just some examples. I am not a big horror expert, but I know there are more out there, and at the very least, there is certainly a lot of artwork depicting the concept of a violent deer monster in the woods. Which brings us to talking about the Wogo. Right, okay, quick clarification. I've heard a few times recently that apparently some Native Americans consider it offensive to even utter the name of this creature, so just to be respectful and safe, I'll be censoring it throughout the rest of this video, even though I say it regularly while recording this. Sorry to throw off the flow, just had to clarify that. Alright, if you're like me and grew up watching Lost Tapes on Animal Planet, you grew up believing that the Wogo is a man-turned-cannibal deer monster connected to Native American folklore. This is almost correct, except for one thing. The deer part. Yeah, the depiction of Wogos as deer monsters is incorrect. The deer skull thing is an inaccurate artistic depiction choice. If Wogos are to be depicted as horror monsters, the more accurate representation would be people with nearly bone-thin limbs that, despite constantly eating, have deformed, empty-looking stomachs that'll never be full. Because that's all they are at the end of the day. Normal people who have resorted to one of the worst crimes imaginable, cannibalism, out of desperation. What I'm trying to say is, Until Dawn, the video game with this line of dialogue,
understand the palm of my hand, bitch,
was somehow more accurate at representing the concept of Wogos visually than a show solely about cryptids. Look, I love cryptid shows, I do, but that is a hilarious L to take, and Animal Planet does that way too often. And on a side note, everything I just said can also pretty much be equally applied to skinwalkers. Make no mistake, I love a good meme about them here and there, but they also tend to get thrown into the internet blender a lot. And most of the time when someone calls something a skinwalker, they're either going off incorrect info, intentionally lying, or just doing it for a meme devoid of proper historical context.
They don't got that window seat. They don't got that window.
Again though, I'm not gonna lie, some of the memes about them can be pretty funny.
Well, in what challenge are we talking, Mr. Beast? What challenge are we talking about? The sixth challenge!
But okay, why is this evil deer concept so popular? Why do we include deer in parts of primarily forest horror so much? Horns I get. They can just be intimidating and accentuate a character's silhouette to help it stand out. But why deer specifically so much instead of other forest animals that get less horror clout than wolves? Well, as always, every fear is subjective and can have layers. However, I think I have an answer figured out for this question that can be summed up in one word. One word that basically gets at what this whole video is all about. Corruption. Walk with me. Now, we all know deer are prey animals. They get hunted by a large variety of predators around the world. Wolves, coyotes, bears, cougars, bobcats, lynx, wolverines, some species of eagles and owls, crocodiles, alligators, pythons, anacondas, Komodo dragons, leopards, tigers, domestic and feral dogs, and lastly, humans. But despite that many predators regularly going after them and their reputation as peaceful creatures, they are responsible for a scary number of human deaths. Yeah, over 400 on average alone from car accidents where one or both parties ended up getting killed. But that's not the only thing worth fearing here. Those are accidents. But what happens when a deer wants you dead? See, because of centuries of predation, deer don't lack self-defense. If they can't run away, they can at least ram or charge at, or even gore threats with their horns. And if they can get close to you on their hind legs while threatened, they will kick and punch the shit out of you with their hooves, as seen here with a hunter who got too close to one. But he was lucky. Injured, yes, but fine. Which is more than can be said for instances where people sadly end up getting gored, killed, or brutally scarred by them. This is where the corruption idea comes into play if we link this back to horror media. Some of the most popular horror of all time comes from the uncanny valley, when something looks or feels familiar or right, but is just off. When things look either cartoony or realistic or human in some sense, but not enough in your mind, that's the uncanny valley talking. And I think that's where the fear of deer or deer imagery is from. It's corrupting the image of a usually preyed upon animal into something awful and much more monstrous. Remember, despite some water deer species in China having fangs and the chronic wasting disease phenomena creating zombie deer, long story, deer are herbivores and don't eat any. Yo, what the fuck? So if you see a deer or deer-like thing hunting something, it's creepy. It doesn't feel right because it's the prey becoming the predator. But there's one last piece of this puzzle that I think adds to this. Again, in case it wasn't already clear, deer don't try to kill regularly. They only attack if they feel threatened or cornered. You or another animal has to set them off, because they are not inherently violent. So if a monstrous deer or a deer-like monster attacked you in the woods at night or followed you, I think it's scary for two factors. It's the fear of something usually nice turning deadly, and the thought that you caused this act of aggression. You did something to piss off this otherwise peaceful, preyed upon animal. An animal that knows these woods better than you do. And you need to go now. It's all about corrupting a creature that usually symbolizes peace and beauty in the forests of our world. And again, although this opinion is very subjective, I know I'm not the only one who's had this thought, because after I landed on it when starting work on this script, I found a video by Nick Carlson Press titled The Hidden Horror of Deer, which came to a very similar conclusion to the one I have. I highly recommend you check out the video if you're interested. It's a good watch, shorter than this one, and makes a lot of points I make in this video with more visual examples, along with a guess as to where the inaccurate depictions of the go came from. But okay, I know by now you're asking, Kevin, that's fascinating and all, but what about Alastor? What the fuck are you building up to with this? How is any of this deer nonsense a good substitute for the voodoo stuff? What is the goal? Those are all fair questions and I shall now answer them, but you're gonna have to bear with me a little bit longer. Last stretch, folks. Let's talk. To recap, while it was likely not included with ill intent by the team, the depiction of Vebs and other voodoo symbols in Hazbin Hotel is seen as problematic for people because we already have a century's worth of misrepresentation towards voodoo and vodou as practices that intend to vilify the religion. So continuing to associate that with an evil, untrustworthy character in hell is not exactly the best look and is thus seen as problematic by people. Not helped by how it kind of feels slapped on for a spooky aesthetic as opposed to actually saying something about Alastor as a person. But the first season is out and what's done is done, so how can we keep season 1 as it is while changing this? Well, here's my pitch. Alastor's voodoo iconography and Vevs should be retconned. They're not actually Vevs and voodoo, but instead an imposter. A dark forest magic using that imagery to stay hidden. To clarify, this would not be a supposed real-world magic, religious belief, or force. No, this would be an original idea solely for this universe. Its main demon looking like a deer lord. An image of corrupted prey for the shadow of a predator. This way, if we can't just replace the symbols in the episodes already released, which I get, we can still keep season 1 as flawed as it is, only now they're not the actual voodoo symbols, they're another power pretending to be them. It is a force of corruption trying to keep itself from being seen so that it can keep foes guessing. Yet somehow, Alastor, once a human, wields it. And I think this idea can accomplish and open up so much for his character if done right. Putting aside retconning the bad optic stuff, this could add a lot more fear and intrigue to Alastor. How did this radio-voiced cannibal tap into some ancient forest power no human is meant to find or use? Did he get it when he was alive, or after he made his deal with who? Lilith? Some other angel or heavenly being? Maybe a good voodoo practitioner so you can balance out the bad optics of this even more? And what does that say if a being from heaven could bind such a terrible person to this force of darkness? One likely linked to this man's death. Or maybe that's how he died. What if some corruptive force, say, turned him into a deer after he came across it as punishment? One where, for finding it, he wasn't just killed, he was hunted like an animal, chased down by dogs or killed by a hunter as punishment for finding and disturbing this force of darkness. I don't know about you, but that sounds really interesting to me. And again, it could also actually say something about Alastor's character visually. Despite seeming disconnected, you could tie this whole idea into his radio persona and make it a part of his character. I mean, after all, lying on the radio is not new. Maybe Alastor, assuming there isn't extended lore I missed in my research for this video, was a human who used a talk show on the radio and the fame from that to not only manipulate people, but also get close enough to kill and eat them. Hell, if you really wanted to go deeper with this, you could swing back around to the whole misinterpretation thing with Woogos and other Native American stories. What if that's what got Alastor connected to this magic and sent to hell on top of the cannibalism? What if he used his radio show and life to tell inaccurate stories that made Native people and customs look bad or scary, but he didn't care because, hey, they bring in listeners and views? Or maybe there's a better idea in all of this that you can come up with, cause I don't know anymore. I just hope at least half of this makes any sense. But regardless, even if it's a messy point, I still have one to make at all. So let me just start wrapping up by saying this. To make this as clear as possible, I am not using this video to call VivziePop or the crew that worked on Hazbin Hotel awful people at all. Okay? You hear that, Vivzie? Did you actually hear that, or are you gonna block me like you do a lot of people who criticize? However, this voodoo thing is still doing damage. Including this imagery just for the sake of making Alastor look creepy or to add an aesthetic is not a great decision, and unless they actually use it to say something about Alastor's character in the future, it's not worth it. It's only going to make the show and Vivzie look worse than they already do in the eyes of critics and haters. Of course, I don't work on the show. I don't know what the plans are for the rest of it, and maybe all the stuff discussed here could technically end up being a part of the show, or just be a bunch of unintentional nonsense babbling. But, at the very least, even if they can't undo what's been shown in Season 1, I think if you leaned into that deer motif, and paired it with thematic concepts of corruption or misinformation correctly, you could create a new kind of dark magic unique to Alastor that could enhance his character and recontextualize this appropriative decision into a scary recovery. Or just, you know, use fucking radio symbols like you should have! Literally, all you had to do was just add something that actually makes thematic and visual sense for this character to have. This entire conversation, all these accusations of racism, all these discussions could have been avoided had you just made this single decision. And this video you've grown incredibly tired of editing right now could have been completely avoided had you just chosen something without a super complex topic that you probably shouldn't even be talking about in the first place because you're an outsider to a broad majority of it. Yeah, you right. Well, anyway, wait, who are you and what are you doing in my house? Anyway, at last, that's gonna do it for this video. I'm American Elephant, call me Kevin, thank you all for stopping by Elephant Power Productions, subscribe if you want more content like this, have a safe, happy Halloween, and I will see you on the next episode of Kev Talks. Take care, beware. And a Mandla and Lovu to all of you. And on that note, I should be done, but I can't help but feel like I forgot to talk about something else related to Alastor. Maybe the fandom can help jog my memory. Hey, Hazbin Hotel fandom, could you help me out with... What in the fuck?! Video's over! Everyone go trick or treat! I hate all of you!
Man, just what are you doing?
What am I doing? I'm saying the N-word.
I don't think you can legally say that.
You sure about that? Oh no. I'm black now, Spider-Man.
You made yourself black so you can say the N-word?
That's right, Spider-Man. And you can't stop me.
Oh, shit.